This hearing will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recess at any time. Good morning and welcome to our distinguished witnesses. We are here to discuss a very important topic, one that has enormous potential to change the way we protect human health and the environment. This hearing is an opportunity to discuss the opportunities and challenges for expanding the use of more sustainable chemicals and processes through the chemical science and engineering enterprise. I look forward to a discussion about the market drivers for sustainability in the chemical industry, the integration of sustainability in chemistry education, and the role of the federal government in supporting research and commercialization of these innovations. Chemistry touches every aspect of modern society. Innovations in chemistry have improved the performance of countless products we use every day, including cars, kitchen appliances, and clothing. These improvements have increased our productivity and our quality of life immeasurably. Unfortunately, many of the most widely used industrial chemicals are potentially hazardous to human health and the environment. PFAS, for example, has become an environmental and public health crisis in my home state of Michigan, which may have more than 11,000 sites contaminated with PFAS chemicals. These chemicals have been linked to cancer and other disastrous health side effects, particularly for children and pregnant women. Instead of focusing on the containment and safe disposal of toxic waste products at the middle or end of the life cycle, sustainable chemistry emphasizes the design of safer, more sustainable chemicals and processes at the beginning. However, the widespread adoption of sustainable chemistry principles has been hindered by a number of challenges, such as a need for more research, a lack of coordination across the federal government, and that's something we here at the Science Committee appreciate and champion, which is the interagency effort of making this federal government work better for the people it serves, the need for large capital investments, and a lack of consensus among stakeholders about how to characterize and assess sustainability in the chemistry industry. I would now like to yield the remainder of my time to my colleague, Dr. Lipinski.
I want to thank you, Chairwoman Stevens, for your yielding. Thank you for holding this hearing. I've long supported investments in research at our nation's university and national labs, as well as methods of improving technology transfer. Sustainable chemistry is one of the areas that I think merits extra attention. And I want to thank Chairwoman Stevens, Chairwoman Johnson, Ranking Member Baird, and Ranking Member Lucas for holding this hearing today. Chemical innovation means that products perform better and are more affordable. Increasingly, consumers are also demanding innovations that result in lower environmental impact. I'm concerned that the federal government does not currently do enough to incentivize basic chemical research that, when scaled at the industrial level, minimizes harm to human health and the environment. We need a national framework that incentivizes research on reactions that require less energy, processes that generate less waste, and products that are less harmful to the environment. If these concepts are considered at the basic research stage, companies will have more tools to create benign products while minimizing adverse environmental impacts. This is an opportunity for federal, academic, and industry partners to work together in a way that will grow our economy and improve our environment. That's why I've introduced H.R. 2051 along with my Chemistry Caucus co-chair, Mr. Molinar. The Sustainable Chemistry R&D Act would improve coordination across the federal government for research, tech transfer, and training in sustainable chemistry. I thank many of my colleagues, including Chairwoman Stevens, for being co-sponsors, and I hope others will join after this hearing today. I want to thank the witnesses for being here today. Again, thank the Chairwoman for holding this hearing. I think it's a very important hearing. I don't want anyone to take the fact that there are a few members here that of a lack of interest. This is probably, fingers crossed, our last day before getting out of here for August. I think there is a great interest. I know there's been great interest in members who I've spoken with about this bill, and I think it's something important that we can do in a bipartisan manner here. And I thank the Chairwoman again, and I yield back to her.
Congressman Lipinski's right. We're fired up about sustainable chemistry. And before I recognize Dr. Baird, I'd like to present two letters for the record. The first letter is from the American Chemical Society, and the second letter is from GC3 on the Sustainable Chemistry Alliance in support of HR 2051. And with that, the chair now recognizes Dr. Baird for an opening statement.
Good morning, and thank you, Chairwoman Stevens, for holding today's hearing on innovations in sustainable chemistry. This hearing introduces or continues our subcommittee's focus on new innovations and technologies that will drive the American economy into the future. Chemistry is essential to our economy and plays a vital role in helping to solve the biggest challenges facing our nation and the world. From medicine to energy to production, chemical manufacturing touches our lives every day. In the Hoosier State, and I'd also say that's where Purdue University is, anyway, chemical manufacturing is one of the largest industries, and it represents over $27 billion of our state's economy every year. In my district alone, chemical industry employs over 2,300 people. The United States is second only to Germany in the export of chemical goods. But global competition is increasing, and we must innovate to meet the demands of the 21st century. There's a market demand for chemical products that use resources more efficiently, are safer for both humans and the environment, and at the same time, consumers want these products to be just as effective or more effective than the traditional products of the past. Sustainable chemistry, or green chemistry, is a relatively new field intended to meet this market demand. As we hear today, industry is investing considerable time and resources in research and development for sustainable chemistry. I look forward to hearing from our witnesses about those innovations, and I really appreciate all of you witnesses taking the time to be with us today. I also look forward to hearing what appropriate role the federal government might play, whether it's investing in the basic research to address knowledge or any knowledge gaps that we might have, or helping the industry develop voluntary standards or metrics. I again thank Chairwoman Stevens for holding today's hearing, and I yield back.
The chair now recognizes the chairwoman of the full committee, Ms. Johnson, for an opening statement.
Thank you very much, Chairwoman Stevens and Ranking Member Dr. Baird, for holding this hearing. And I would like also to welcome the expert witnesses and thank you for participating today. The purpose of this hearing is to explore the challenges and opportunities to expand the development, production, and use of more sustainable chemicals across our economy. The Science, Space, and Technology Committee first advanced legislation to promote sustainable chemistry 12 years ago. Back then, my Republican colleague, Congressman Phil Gingrey, introduced the Green Chemistry Research and Development Act of 2007, which the committee and then the House supported on a bipartisan basis. There was a bipartisan bill in the Senate as well. Unfortunately, it did not advance. And that was already 10 years after Dr. Paul Anastasius and Dr. John Warner developed 12 principles to guide the principle of sustainable chemistry. In this job, we know we have to take a long view. However, the longer we wait to take action on so many fronts, the more we are seeing consequences of our inaction. The chemical industry, which created many of the great innovations of the 20th century, has also resulted in substantial harm to both human and environmental health. We rush to develop innovations to make our lives easier and more convenient without considering the life cycle cost. I'm concerned about the steps that this administration has taken to reverse the little progress we've made in sustainable chemistry. In 2015, President Obama issued an executive order that required federal agencies to purchase selected products manufactured with more sustainable chemicals, creating a market for these products. Our purchasing power is one of the important levers of government and also a demonstration of leadership. Unfortunately, that executive order was rescinded by President Trump in May of 2018. In addition, EPA has a long-standing program called STAR, which has been an important source of funding for sustainable chemistry research in our nation's universities. The current administration has proposed to eliminate that entire program. I spoke with the Secretary of EPA just yesterday on this program, which he committed to look into. Even the National Science Foundation could do more. While the agency has supported initiatives focused on sustainable chemistry, they have not made much effort to integrate the principles of sustainable chemistry into their broader portfolio of chemistry research and education. While I support additional investments in sustainable chemistry, leadership is not always about more money and new programs. I want to commend Congressman Lipinski for introducing Sustainable Chemistry Research and Development Act. I'm happy to be a co-sponsor of that legislation, and I look forward to advancing it on a bipartisan basis. 20 years have passed since the 12 principles of sustainable chemistry were proposed. It is past time that the federal government, in partnership with the private sector, prioritizes investing in the research and tools to enable a sustainable chemistry industry. I look forward to today's testimony and discussion, and I yield back.
If there are any members who wish to submit additional opening statements, your statements will be added to the record at this point. At this time, I would like to introduce our witnesses. Our first witness is Dr. Timothy Persons. Dr. Persons is the Chief Scientist and Managing Director of GAO's Science, Technology, Assessment, and Analytics team. He also directs the GAO's Science, Technology, and Engineering portfolio, as well as GAO's Audit Innovation Lab. He's a busy guy. Prior to joining GAO, Dr. Persons was the technical director for the Intelligence Advanced Research Projects Agency. He received his Bachelor of Science degree from James Madison University, a Master of Science from Emory University, and a Master of Science and PhD from Wake Forest Engineering. After Dr. Persons is Dr. John Warner. Dr. Warner is the founder and chief scientific officer of the Warner-Babcock Institute for Green Chemistry, a research laboratory that partners with industry to develop green chemistry technologies. In 1998, Dr. Warner co-authored the 12 Principles of Green Chemistry, and he is currently the editor of the journal Green Chemistry Letters and Reviews. In 2004, Dr. Warner received the Presidential Award for Excellence in Science, Mathematics, and Engineering Mentorship for his work to increase participation of students from underrepresented populations in chemistry. Woohoo. Prior to founding the Warner-Babcock Institute, Dr. Warner was a senior research group leader at the Polaroid Corporation and a professor of chemistry and plastics engineering at UMass Boston and Lowell. He received his BS in chemistry from UMass Boston and his PhD in chemistry from Princeton University. Our third witness is Dr. Julie Zimmerman. Dr. Zimmerman is a professor and senior associate dean at the School of Forestry and Environmental Studies and the deputy director of the Center for Green Chemistry and Green Engineering at Yale University. Prior to working at Yale, Dr. Zimmerman was a program manager at the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, where she established the National Sustainable Design Competition, P3, People, Prosperity, and Planet. We like that, which is an award. She is also the co-author of the textbook Environmental Engineering Fundamentals, Sustainability Design. Dr. Zimmerman earned her Bachelor of Science degree from the University of Virginia and her PhD from the University of Michigan. Go Blue. Our next witness is Miss Ann Kolton. Ms. Kolton is the Executive Vice President of Communications, Sustainability, and Market Outreach for the American Chemistry Council. Ms. Kolton is responsible for the development and execution of domestic and international strategies to advance industry advocacy priorities, sustainability practices, and marketplace relationships with manufacturers and retailers. During the administration of President George W. Bush, Ms. Kolton held a number of positions at the Departments of Energy and the Treasury, as well as Assistant Press Secretary in the White House Press Office. I also served at the Department of Treasury, so glad to be with a fellow Treasury alum this morning. Ms. Kolton is a graduate of Southwestern University in Georgetown, Texas. Our final witness is Mr. Mitchell Toomey. Mr. Toomey is the Director of Sustainability for BASF in North America. Prior to joining BASF, Mr. Toomey served as a sustainability expert at the United Nations, where his most recent position was Director, Sustainable Development Goals Action Camp for the Sustainable Goals Action Campaign. Prior to joining the UN, Mr. Toomey worked in the private sector, helping to build 2 startups. He has earned a BA in philosophy and a Master of Business Administration degree. And where was it from? New York University. All right, great, thank you. As our witnesses should know, you will each have 5 minutes for your spoken testimony. Your written testimony will be included for the record of the hearing. And when you've completed your spoken testimony, we will begin with questions. Each member will have 5 minutes to question the panel, and we will start with Dr. Persons.
Thank you. Good morning, Chairwoman Stevens, Ranking Member Baird, and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss our technology assessment on sustainable chemistry. Chemistry contributes to virtually every aspect of modern life, from the production of food and clean drinking water to medicines, cleaners, personnel care products, and more. According to the American Chemistry Council, the chemical industry in 2016 supported nearly 1/4 of U.S. GDP. Moreover, the federal government estimates that the chemical manufacturing industry employed more than 858,000 people in June 2019 and generated an additional 2.7 million indirect jobs via industry suppliers. Despite these positive contributions to quality of life and other social and economic goals, chemical production can result in negative health and environmental consequences. Many in the chemical industry are working to address these issues through improving the environmental sustainability of their own chemical processes and providing more sustainable products and technologies to others. In my testimony today, I'll discuss an overview of the concepts behind sustainable chemistry, how the federal government, industry, and others contribute to the development and use of such technologies, and key opportunities and challenges. In spite of the lack of a standard definition for sustainable chemistry and lack of agreement on standard ways of measuring or assessing it, there are nevertheless common themes underlying what sustainable chemistry strives to achieve, including improving the efficiency in the usage of natural resources, reducing or eliminating the use or generation of hazardous substances, developing innovative chemical transformations, minimizing the use of non-renewable resources, and considering all life cycle stages when evaluating a product as depicted in this figure up on the screen. The federal government, industry, and other stakeholders play a number of roles, sometimes in collaboration, to advance the development and use of more sustainable chemical processes and products. Federal programs support research on the impacts of chemicals on human and environmental health, support the development of more sustainable chemical processes and their commercialization, and aid the expansion of markets for products manufactured with more sustainable chemicals and processes. The chemical manufacturing industry, companies and retailers, state governments, academic institutions, and NGOs also seek to influence the development and use of more sustainable chemistry processes and products through activities such as supporting workforce development, exploring breakthrough technologies, setting sustainability criteria for purchases, regulating chemicals and products, conducting research on chemical impacts, and developing tools and resources for industry, respectively. Integrating these principles and activities together, the field of sustainable chemistry has the potential to inspire new products and processes, create jobs, and enhance benefits to human health and the environment. Much more work is needed to realize its full promise, including the following: First, the development of a robust definition of sustainable chemistry leading to a life cycle assessment framework for metrics, measurement tools, and assessments. Second, the realization of a strategic and effective national initiative formulated by the federal government in partnership with industry, academia, and key nonprofit institutions. And third, the integration of sustainable chemistry principles into educational programs for the current and future generation of chemists. Although there are several challenges to implementing more sustainable chemistry technologies, including technological and business ones, the preeminent issue remains the lack of a standard definition for sustainable chemistry and lack of standard ways of measuring or assessing it. Without basic information such as a standardized approach for assessing the sustainability of chemical processes or products, better information on product content throughout the supply chain, and more complete data on the health and environmental impacts of chemicals throughout their life cycle, stakeholders can't make informed decisions that compare the sustainability of various products. In conclusion, there is a recognized need for new processes that make more efficient use of available resources, reuse products or their components during manufacturing, and account for impacts across the entire life cycle of chemical processes and products. A transition toward the use of sustainable chemistry technologies is possible and could be catalyzed by national leadership and driven by cross-sectoral collaboration to help guide the future choices of consumers, chemists, workers, and others for overall economic, environmental, and social good. Chairwoman Stevens, Ranking Member Baird, and members of the committee, this concludes my prepared statement. Thank you for your attention on this important issue. And thanks to the GAO team who made this testimony possible. I'd be happy to respond to any questions when you're ready.
Thank you. Chairwoman Stevens, Ranking Member Baird, and members of the subcommittee, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. My name is John Warner. I've been a professional chemist for 31 years with nearly 250 U.S. and international patents. I've worked with more than 100 companies helping them invent cost-effective green chemistry solutions. In the early 1990s, I was a chemist at the Polaroid Corporation. Because of one of my first inventions was Benign by design, I started interacting with the EPA's nascent green chemistry program. In the mid-1990s, Dr. Paul Anastas and I wrote the book Green Chemistry Theory and Practice that presents the set of 12 principles to help chemists avoid the use and generation of hazardous materials. At that time, I came to realize that few, if any, university chemistry programs in the world require students to have any training in the understanding of the relationship between molecular structure and negative impacts on human health and the environment. Wanting to change the way we teach chemistry, I left to become a professor of chemistry and plastics engineering in the UMass system, where we began the world's first PhD program in green chemistry. Like a typical chemistry graduate program in chemistry, but it added classes in toxicology, environmental mechanisms, and chemicals law and policy. In 2004, I received an award from President George W. Bush and the NSF for these efforts. As you will note, I've been using the term green chemistry, not sustainable chemistry. Both are important for the future of society. Sustainable chemistry is a large umbrella concept that addresses many aspects of the chemical enterprises. Green chemistry specifically focuses on the inventive process to reduce hazards broadly in the first place. One way of looking at it, sustainable chemistry deals with what a technology does. Green chemistry deals with what a technology is. My point is that by mitigating risk by controlling and limiting exposure of hazardous materials will always come at a price. Every effort to reduce intrinsic hazard through green chemistry will lessen these associated costs. To demonstrate the economic viability of green chemistry, in 2007, Jim Babcock and I formed the Warner Babcock Institute for Green Chemistry that focuses on creating commercially relevant chemistry technologies consistent with the principles of green chemistry. Since its creation, we've partnered with over 100 companies to invent technologies across a wide variety of industry sectors. Our inventions have also been the foundation of new companies in personal care and construction materials, pharmaceuticals, and energy. All of these inventions, in such a short time with only 20 scientists, is extremely fast and efficient. I feel that the major cause of our high productivity is the fact that we do green chemistry. In 2014, I was honored to receive the Perkin Medal, the highest honor in U.S. industrial chemistry. In 2016, I was named a AAAS Lemelson Invention Ambassador. While I was the individual named in these awards, I feel that they're actually recognition of the entire growing field of green chemistry and the green chemistry community. In 2007, I co-founded the nonprofit organization Beyond Benign with Dr. Amy Cannon. Our K-12 curriculum and teacher programs integrate green chemistry and sustainable chemistry principles into the classroom. We develop and provide open access modules to all school levels that illustrate real-world industrial examples of green chemistry. Our higher education efforts support colleges and universities trying to implement green chemistry into their curriculum. This is a very small organization. It needs to be emulated, it needs to be expanded. The Sustainable Chemistry Research and Development Act of 2019 is a timely and important effort in maintaining and growing U.S. industrial competitiveness. It is important to underscore the critical need to see green chemistry as the fundamental differentiating concept within this framework. In order to have a workforce with the skills and training necessary to achieve these aspirational objectives, a specific focus on green chemistry must be central to this effort. Green chemistry has been around for nearly 30 years. Unlike sustainable chemistry, it is well-defined. It is an established science with dozens of international journals and nearly 50 textbooks. For both environmental protection and economic competitiveness, it is urgent that U.S. finds a way to accelerate education, incentivize investment, and facilitate more widespread adoption of green chemistry, the molecular science of sustainability. Thank you very much.
Madam Chairwoman, Ranking Member Dr. Baird, and members of the committee, thank you for the invitation to be here today, and thank you for your attention on this important and urgent topic. My name is Julie Zimmerman, and I am a professor at Yale University in the Department of Chemical and Environmental Engineering, as well as the School of Forestry and Environmental Studies. I also serve as our Deputy Director for our Center of Green Chemistry and Green Engineering. I am here to express my strong support for the Sustainable Chemistry Research and Development Act being considered. It is appropriate that this hearing is in the House Science Committee because, as we have heard earlier this morning from Dr. Warner, green chemistry is the science of sustainability. I'd like to make 4 brief points. First, to paraphrase a fellow New Jersey native, green chemistry was born in the USA. In the early 1990s, the green chemistry program was launched and was defined by Dr. Polanastis and Dr. John Warner as the design of chemical products and processes that reduce or eliminate the use and generation of hazardous substances. The term sustainable chemistry has been introduced more recently and possesses countless definitions. Green chemistry is chemistry. There are few people in the world that would argue that a sustainable future can be achieved in the absence of green chemistry. Everything we see, touch, and feel is a chemical, and green chemistry provides the opportunity to fundamentally redesign the material basis of our economy and our society. However, it is equally true that green chemistry alone, no matter how fundamental, broad in reach, and impact, is not going to be sufficient for achieving a sustainable future. Sustainable chemistry cannot be conducted in the absence of green chemistry. Therefore, any construct of genuine sustainable chemistry would need to recognize that green chemistry is the centerpiece, heart and soul, central and essential element. Second, green chemistry is not a theory or merely an idea, but rather a proven, demonstrated success story over the past 20 years. Green chemistry has filled scientific journals with world-class science that has invented new benign materials and molecules, and has even been cited in Nobel Prize awards. It has not only been extremely effective in protecting human health and the environment, it has accomplished this while increasing profitability and competitiveness of almost every industrial sector. From plastics to pesticides, from energy to electronics, from building materials to biotech, green chemistry has a proven track record of success. Third, 4 words: nothing to fight about. At a time when every environmental issue seems contentious and controversial, green chemistry has accomplished all of the success with astounding levels of strategic and systematic partnerships between environmentalists and industry, as well as other stakeholders. Examples include the Green Chemistry and Commerce Council, the American Chemical Society's Green Chemistry Industrial Roundtables, and even the work in my own center at Yale. Fourth, with such great news story, what is the problem? It is that green chemistry is still the exception to the rule. With all of the products and manufacturing processes that have been reinvented using green chemistry, there are a plethora that have yet to be addressed. All of the successes thus far represent a small fraction of the power and potential of green chemistry. Why is this? Lack of awareness in general, lack of training for students and practitioners, lack of funding for scientists, and lack of incentives for industry. In my written testimony, I address these issues in much greater detail, but in summary, I would suggest that 1, there needs to be an awareness-raising campaign such that people are aware of the benefits and future potential of green chemistry. Scientists to do it, industry to pursue it, consumers to demand it. 2, every student and practitioner that makes molecules and manipulates materials needs to be trained and have a working proficiency in green chemistry. 3, there needs to be interagency coordination and research funding in green chemistry that is substantial and sustained, rather than marginal and mercurial. 4, industry efforts towards green chemistry should be recognized and facilitated. In conclusion, the powerful tool of green chemistry is essential to sustaining healthy people, a healthy planet, and a healthy economy. It must no longer be the exception to the rule, but must become the rule itself, simply the way things are done. Because in the final analysis, while this is certainly about our immediate prosperity, more importantly, it is about our posterity. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Chairwoman Stevens, Ranking Member Baird, and subcommittee members, my name is Ann Kolton. Thank you for inviting me to testify and voice ACC and our members' strong support for the Sustainable Chemistry Research and Development Act of 2019. This legislation will play a key role in enabling technologies and tools that can help advance the sustainable chemistry innovations that ACC members are developing. ACC represents the leading companies engaged in the business of chemistry, a $526 billion enterprise and a key element of our nation's economy. Our members apply the science of chemistry to make the innovative products that help improve people's lives. As we've heard, sustainable chemistry can mean different things to different people. In our view, sustainable chemistry captures 2 equally important concepts. First, being that chemistry is manufactured and utilized in a responsible way that manages associated risks. ACC and its members have a long history of continuously enhancing environment, health, safety, and security performance through our world-class Responsible Care program, a requirement of ACC membership, which celebrated its 30th anniversary in 2018. To further emphasize the importance of product safety and stewardship to ACC members, the Responsible Care Product Safety Code was adopted in 2012. This code emphasizes the need for strong cooperation between chemical manufacturers, their customers, and their customers' customers to promote the safe and sustainable management and use of chemical products. The second important concept of sustainable chemistry is that innovations in chemistry enable progress and achievement of a variety of sustainability goals, from reductions in greenhouse gas emissions to hunger alleviation and improved quality of life. In fact, chemistry is the science behind sustainability, and without chemistry innovations, a sustainable future will be an unattainable goal. Harnessing this power to enable sustainability progress is embedded in our industry's values and central to the business strategy of our members. As such, our companies are investing more than $12 billion a year in research and development to help advance sustainable chemistry. In 2017, ACC's Board of Directors approved a set of sustainability principles to capture our members' commitment to safe use of chemicals and their efforts to build an innovation pipeline of products and technologies that contribute to sustainability through lower greenhouse gas emissions, increased energy efficiency, less water, improvements in health and wellness, food security, access to clean water, modern sanitation, and safe, comfortable shelter. I'd like to share just a few examples of ACC member company innovations. A refrigerant developed by the Chemours Company, which can help reduce nearly 68 million tons of carbon dioxide emissions, equivalent to taking 15 million cars off the road. Agriculture films made from polymers developed by ExxonMobil Chemical can help preserve and prevent damage to crops and produce, reducing food waste and spoilage. And scientists at Covestro have developed a catalyst that can put waste carbon dioxide to work by converting it into flexible polyurethane foam for use in products like mattresses and furniture. As you can see, sustainable chemistry is dynamic and multidimensional. To define it by a single attribute or outcome, such as the hazard profile of a specific chemical, could mean foregoing numerous sustainability benefits, even when decades of scientific research have shown that chemicals can be used safely in a range of applications. At the same time, we do know that the products and processes of chemistry can have an impact on people and the planet. Through the Responsible Care Program and individual company actions, our members are continually working to drive solutions to these challenges, including one of the most compelling issues facing us today, and that is the unmanaged plastic waste in the environment. Many ACC companies have joined with companies across the chemical and plastics value chain, including consumer goods manufacturers and waste management firms, to found the Alliance to End Plastic Waste, a CEO-led, cross-sector, nonprofit organization dedicated to developing and accelerating scalable solutions to help end plastic waste in the environment. Alliance members are committed to deploying $1.5 billion over the next 5 years to develop the systems, knowledge, and infrastructure needed to reduce, recycle, reuse, recover, and repurpose plastic waste. I've highlighted some of these initiatives in my written testimony. I'd like to thank you for your time and the opportunity to share ACC's views and commitment to sustainable chemistry. We look forward to serving as a resource for this committee and others as this important sustainable chemistry legislation moves ahead. I'd be happy to take questions.
Good morning, Chairwoman Stevens, Ranking Member Baird, and members of the Research and Technology Subcommittee. Thank you for inviting me to testify this morning about BASF's views on sustainable chemistry and Sustainable Chemistry Research and Development Act of 2019. BASF Corporation is headquartered in Florham Park, New Jersey. This is the North America affiliate of the German global company BASF. In the United States, we have 16,000 employees working at more than 100 sites across 30 states, including Michigan, New Jersey, New York, Illinois, Tennessee, Ohio, California, among others. As the leading chemical company worldwide, BASF supplies ingredients and solutions that house, feed, drive, and care for the world. At BASF, we understand the challenges for a more livable, sustainable future. Towards 2050, several megatrends are seen on the horizon. Projected population growth to 10 billion people around the world, a doubling of per capita income, and close to 70% urbanization, with more than a billion people moving towards cities. We provide chemistry solutions to customers across a broad range of industries to start to tackle some of these megatrends, including the materials for batteries for electric vehicles, lowering the impact of agricultural solutions on the environment, insulating homes and businesses to use less energy, and to increase resilience to natural disasters. Perhaps the most important thing we're doing can be explained through our sustainable solution steering methodology. Since 2013, BASF has been using its own method for ensuring that we produce sustainable chemistry. We assess the economic, environmental, and social impacts of a product and its application in various markets and industries. Products are categorized into sustainability accelerators, performers, and challenged products. We've conducted these sustainability assessments on almost all of our relevant portfolio of 60,000 products, which account for about $63 billion in sales. My written statement includes some examples of these accelerator products. Around half of our total annual R&D spending goes towards developing low carbon emitting products and optimizing our processes. In 2018, the use of BASF products by our customers prevented 640 million metric tons of CO2 emissions. We ourselves recently announced our target of CO2 neutral growth into 2030 for BASF. BASF has more than 11,000 employees involved in research and development in 2018. We once again ranked among the leading companies in the Patent Asset Index, a method that compares patent portfolios industry-wide. Due to the growing demands of our customers for sustainability, more and more of our innovation initiatives focus on sustainability gains. BASF proudly supports the Sustainable Chemistry Research and Development Act, H.R. 2051. We are encouraged by the increasing support for this legislation that seeks to coordinate federal activity, including research, development, demonstration, commercialization, education, and training efforts in sustainable chemistry. At BASF, we see global market and regulatory drivers for the development and use of more sustainable chemistry throughout the value chain. the challenges companies face finding suitable, sustainable alternatives, and the role of innovation in addressing this challenge. By better coordinating and focusing existing relevant federal R&D, HR 2051 can help guide researchers, especially in academia and smaller companies, to focus their development activities on sustainable chemistry and generate the innovation that is needed to bring these chemistries to market faster. Thank you again for inviting me to talk about BASF's views on sustainable chemistry and the reasons for our support of this act. I'd be glad to answer any questions you may have regarding my testimony. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much to our expert witnesses. And at this point, we're going to begin our first round of questions, and the chair is going to recognize herself for 5 minutes. Dr. Persons, one of the primary findings in the 2018 GAO assessment of sustainable chemistry is this lack of coordination across the federal government and its hindrance of the development of and use of more sustainable chemical products and processes. Why is this the case, and what's the best approach to coordinating activities and programs across federal agencies?
Thanks, Madam Chairwoman. So when we did our study, coordination did come out, as you say, and I think GAO sees this in much of its work, which is coordination is easy to say but often hard to do, and the issue has to do with the incentives on issues. It's usually almost, or it's almost always in our experience, unintended. Folks are working on, I think in this particular case, it's like putting a mosaic picture together, except not everyone knows exactly how the picture is supposed to work out, and they're putting their pieces in while leaving a large amount of gaps there. So I think as you and Chairman Johnson mentioned, the idea of leadership on this is a key issue to try and drive on that, and that's where I think that came out of our stakeholders reporting to us in that report, and then as we see where we sit looking across all of the federal government on coordination issues, that's particularly the case.
And do any of our other panelists have comments on that, or they wish to chime in about their experiences within the federal government and the lack of coordination? Just wanted to give you a chance. Otherwise, I'll continue. A major challenge identified, Dr. Persons, in the 2018 GAO assessment was the lack of consensus regarding the environmental and health factors most important in assessing sustainability. And I'd like all of you to chime in as I have the time. Would you assign a single factor, whether it's toxicity, greenhouse gas emissions, energy use, or recyclability, as the single most important measure of sustainability? And if not, how do you go about prioritizing the factors here?
Yes, thanks for the question. As our technology assessment in 2018 reported, our stakeholders, when we did a survey and did a series of A/B choices to various stakeholders on would you do energy or water use or this or that, the top three in our report, is one of the graphics show, is toxicity. The reduction in toxicity was the #1 concern of the stakeholders. But that said, I think as Drs. Warner and Zimmerman spoken well about the green chemistry idea, about how do we think about things in terms of what the technology is and what it does, that larger framework is still absent. That's the key thing. You can be necessary and do everything right in green chemistry, and it's still not sufficient to do the full sustainability cycle that we pointed out in our report. Thank you.
It's an important issue, because I think if you ask 10 people what should be the most #1 priority, you'll get 10 answers. And if you say, okay, then let's do all 10 of them, then someone's going to want an 11th, and then someone's going to want 50, and then someone's going. And if we approach it by trying to achieve infinity, we can't do it. So who among us decides where do we draw the line? Unfortunately, that is critical. And it's a hard thing to do, and it's going to leave, some people disappointed. But if an organization wants to do the right thing, and we give them as a task infinity, that can't be done. So how do we decide what are the endpoints that we should be focusing on? How do we measure them, and how do we promote them? And that is something we really need to take some serious time thinking about. It's a very difficult task, but I think it's a very critical one.
And building the consensus among industry.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So I think this is, I think this is a really important point to include this development of criteria as a goal of this bill is to bring together this group that would form these consensus standards. I think the word hazard has a really broad definition beyond toxicity. This includes things that might explode or react. Greenhouse gas emissions come under something that might be hazardous. These criteria are so important, as we heard earlier in the executive order, for environmentally preferential purchasing. If we have criteria in place, we can start to drive the market. It will also help with marketing claims and how people are able to make these claims out in the marketplace. And as John mentioned, I think there is this idea of we need a goal out there, and it's okay to drive towards continuous improvement. We don't have to have success immediately on everything, but we can hold that out as a true north of a direction we're all working towards, and as long as we're moving in that direction, we can claim that as a success and a win.
First, I'd say I think you hear there does need to be some element of flexibility in defining sustainable chemistry and for any criteria that are applied to it. I think we at ACC would, of course, advocate for a life cycle approach where you are looking at the effects of chemistry across and benefits across its life cycle from production to end of use. I think we would also support a system where there was flexibility to look at the priorities in a particular geography or application. So for example, in some parts of our country, water scarcity is more of an issue than in others. And so water efficiency might be a more important priority or criteria than in some areas. So as long as risks are managed and managed well, I think we would want to have some flexibility to look at the application and how it can benefit different areas, different geographies, and different applications.
I think we are acting in a marketplace where this is a very real issue. There are demands from different industries for different priorities, and I think as a commercial actor, we need to be ready to not wait for some definition of what's most important, but to respond immediately to those market signals. What we try to do is look at the overall value to society of a specific intervention. You know, if you look at the net costs and the net benefits, you can start to create a decision matrix that makes sense in a business context. It's impossible to have a perfect balance, but I think for each application, you have to make sure that you're taking all those characteristics into account and not just focusing on the potential hazards, but looking at those exponential benefits that could be provided by the application of the technology.
With that, I'm out of time, and I'll yield to my counterpart, Dr. Baird, for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Dr. Persons, on the definition and so on of sustainable chemistry, could you elaborate on what the GAO found in terms of a common understanding of the definition of sustainable chemistry and how that overlaps with green chemistry? And then if you're successful with that, did you find that a common federal definition would be helpful?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the question. The report did not come out and report a definitive definition of sustainable chemistry. That was, in one sense, the key finding, is that there isn't that common understanding yet, but there were instead rather themes, some of which I was mentioning in the earlier opening remarks. Improving efficiency of usage of resources, the idea about managing energy, water, and things also, as you've heard some of our other panelists say, reduction of toxicity or hazardous substances, so all of these elements there. And then how do we do chemical transformations perhaps with more earth-abundant metals, let's say, in catalysts versus rare earth or non-renewable type resources. So the idea about emphasizing and using non-renewable resources is critical. And again, trying to do this all in a life cycle context is what's there, but how to build and have at least a sufficiently, yes, flexible understanding of sustainability, and yet still clear enough, I think, framework around that is there. Currently, the federal agencies are doing various programs and elements with respect to green chemistry and so on, but it just lacks that overarching coordination and framework to help drive that. In terms of the green chemistry versus sustainable, sir, I think that Dr. Warner spoke well about the idea about green chemistry in terms of what the technology is versus what it does, and I think that's the variance. Green chemistry is a key concept within the umbrella of sustainable chemistry, and so winning there is necessary, as Dr. Zimmerman said, but not sufficient. You want to still think about things in this sustainability framework that heretofore has not existed.
Thank you. Ms. Kolton, I understand that you're leading the development of the first ever chemical industry sustainability metrics, and which will measure and report to the U.S. chemical industry sustainability performance. Can you tell us why ACC is undertaking this effort and how it will help the industry?
Certainly. As I mentioned in my testimony, in 2017, ACC adopted industry-wide sustainability principles, and based on those principles, we are in the process of developing metrics to assess progress, encourage process changes, process advancements and enhancements. We think that this will help express our industry's commitment to sustainability, as well as encourage sustainability progress across industries and in our customers and their customers as well.
Thank you. And I have about a minute and a half left, and so again, Ms. Kolton, would you and Mr. Toomey both, you're going to have about 75 seconds. So anyway, what role should the National Institute of Standards and Technology play in supporting industry development of sustainable chemistry? And then the second part of that, should NIST be working with the industry on voluntary standards?
Thank you. Quite simply, I think that there's a need for a comprehensive framework to house this discussion. I think we're all coming at it from different points of view. If we can establish a clear language to talk about these emerging sciences together, that in itself would be the most valuable output of this. As for the measures, I don't have a position on that.
I would say that there's a role for organizations like NIST and many others in this process. I think the principle of stakeholder input, of gathering the perspectives and expertise from a variety of inputs is going to be very important. So certainly we would support the engagement of NIST and others as part of this process.
Thank you. I wish I had more time because I have questions for the other two, but anyway, I'm out of time and I yield back. Thank you.
The gentleman yields back. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes as I sub here for Chairwoman Stevens, and I thank her and Representative Baird, our ranker, for hosting what I think is a very important hearing. And thank you also to our witnesses for joining us today to discuss sustainable chemistry, the future of green innovation. Sustainable chemistry responds to the American people's demands for products made with respect for the health of our environment, our natural resources, and our families. We have an opportunity, and I would say a responsibility, as representatives of the people to foster growth in the field of sustainable chemistry, not only to protect our environment and public health, but also to establish the United States as a global leader in sustainable manufacturing and family and community-safe consumer products. In the 114th Congress, I was intimately involved with negotiations surrounding the Toxic Substance Control Act. While I support many of the positive steps taken by the most recent chemical protections, we have much more to do to ensure Americans' public health and our environment are protected from hazardous chemicals. Supporting the research and development efforts of sustainable chemists will have a direct positive impact on nearly every facet of American industry. The innovation we will need to tackle America's greatest challenges, whether from toxic water and air or the growing climate crisis, starts at the molecular level with sustainable chemistry solutions. Through partnerships between state agencies and local universities and high school teachers, New York's capital region has established itself as a leader in sustainable chemistry education, research, and development. Our state is inspiring a new generation of sustainable chemists through courses of study that not only deepen students' understanding of the subject, but also provide them with a broader awareness of how their actions impact our environment. Manufacturers throughout our region have also taken actions to reduce their environmental impact in all stages of production, from chemical research to waste reduction. I strongly support our Chair's decision to focus today's hearing on research and funding to allow for advances in sustainable chemistry. These advances will stimulate the American economy, protect our health, and preserve the environment for generations to come. And so, for all of our witnesses, my question is, what are some examples of green or sustainable chemistry, chemistry innovation, that can help us understand the future that green chemistry can offer? Anyone want to take a first stab there? Dr. Warner?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. One example that comes to mind is we've recently commercialized a technology to, when we recycle asphalt pavement, when we repave a road, most of the previous asphalt goes to a landfill and can't be reused because the sun and the air oxidize it. Company has invented a technology to allow the complete reuse of the old asphalt so that instead of using virgin materials, you essentially can replace the road with the same materials and repave it, so therefore reducing the energy use and the materials use. That is a company called Collaborative Aggregates that has sales forces across the country. That is an example of a green chemistry sustainability technology that quickly gets adopted into the marketplace.
Thank you so much. Any other examples? Dr. Zimmerman.
Yes, I would say that there are lots of one-off examples. I think the bigger issue around green chemistry has been that it is not systematic, and we know that the breadth of the applications and the success of green chemistry really goes across the chemical enterprise. And so I think really important to this is we can all name, I'm sure, examples within our own experience and our own companies of where we've demonstrated success. I think the idea is this needs to be much more systematic and the way things are done rather than the exceptions and the small stories that we're able to tell.
Awesome. And Ms. Kolton.
Certainly. I had several examples in my opening statement, but I did want to mention one process that is a focus of significant research within the chemical industry, and that's chemical recycling. And this is the opportunity to take used plastics and other plastic-based products back to their monomers and create entirely new products from them. This has the opportunity and the potential to be transformational, but it is a process that requires additional research, development, and refinement. But that is a good example of a large-scale potential technology development that could truly change our society and relies on the principles of sustainability as well as supporting overall sustainability progress.
Thank you. Mr. Toomey.
Simply to reinforce that, we're seeing an enormous demand for recycled content in food applications and other areas where you can't currently use recycled content. This will require some legislation to define exactly how you do that, but also technology innovation. One example is in the automotive industry. We've seen a lightweighting revolution of using more and more plastic parts within the cars. Now the automakers are asking us, can you actually make that plastic part from recycled content? And so that will require sustainable chemistry.
Thank you so much. That concludes my 5 minutes. So I'll now recognize, the chair recognizes Representative Balderson for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, panel, for being here today and taking the time out. My first question is for the full panel. Currently, the National Science Foundation supports innovative research in chemical sciences integrated with education through strategic investment, and developing a global engaged American chemistry workforce. Could you each weigh in on what mode the NSF and other federal agencies could be doing to develop a workforce with the skills to fill the industry jobs? And Dr. Persons, you may lead off.
Yes, thank you, sir, for the question. I'll say briefly, the NSF has centers for chemical innovation, as you mentioned. There's one, for example, at the University of Minnesota on a sustainable program for polymer production and things. And so a lot of it is learning by doing and putting that framework around. But I think, again, in the absence of that framework, there's still pieces of mosaic that the NSF and other entities are laying in without seeing the full picture. And so there are elements of training in this regard toward green chemistry and sustainability, but again, nothing in a holistic or systematic manner yet.
Hi. Thank you. Einstein had a quote, "No problem can be solved at the level of awareness that created it." I think the chemical enterprises needs to reinvent itself. We need to bring new eyes, new ideas into the chemical sciences. The NSF has an opportunity to focus on that, to bring in not just the traditional, acceleration of that which already exists, but when you look at the principles of green chemistry, it actually catalyzes a creative, different way of looking at things, and so has the opportunity to not just accelerate that which we're doing, but expand the bottom, the foundation of what we're doing and what chemical sciences can do to contribute to the economy. And so yes, we need to take the traditional chemical sciences and accelerate green chemistry in there, but we also have to look at this as an opportunity to broaden what it means to be a chemist, what it means to be an inventor, and to bring along into that society new eyes and new ideas.
So I think the NSF has a broad opportunity across many of their programs, from supporting development of new curricular materials, informal science education. This is a great opportunity to go into museums and libraries and have conversations with the public, so broadening what we think about as education. And then, you could really push the field by tying grant funding from the NSF to demonstrating that your curriculum has changed, has evolved, and is aligned with these principles of green chemistry in terms of what is the department level or school level doing. And so that would be a criteria in actually receiving grants from the National Science Foundation. And just one other point, I'm going to build on what Dr. Warner said. We have done some research to show that when you teach green chemistry and green engineering in the curriculum, you recruit and retain women and underrepresented minorities in STEM disciplines that would not be there otherwise because of the compelling nature of this work.
So while I can't speak to exactly the role that NSF should have versus others, I do think that this is a critical issue for industry and for government, and it's going to require the investment and the commitment of both the public and private sectors. Yesterday, there was a story in the media about the skills gap in science and technology could cost the economy over $1 trillion. So this is a critical issue. I think we have an opportunity, as Dr. Warner said, to sort of recast chemistry and really emphasize the role it will play in a sustainable future that's more appealing, perhaps, to younger students, people of a different generation, and giving them the opportunity to be part of an enterprise that does advance us to a more sustainable future. Programs committed to attracting underrepresented groups to STEM education and industries like the chemical industry are very important, and our members are very committed to those and active around the country and around the world in trying to attract new industry members, students, and otherwise to help us achieve these goals.
Thank you. Mr. Toomey.
We would, as a company, would be delighted to see more collaboration with NSF, specifically in what you might call applied sustainability. We have questions coming from customers, real-world demands that are problem statements that we're trying to tackle, but would also, I think, stimulate the interest of university students and others to engage further. I think sometimes you have to have a practical challenge in front of you, especially in a fairly nebulous, ill-defined topic as we are entering into with sustainability. We have challenges. We'd love to see those challenges proliferate through the academic community, and the NSF could be a great partner in such affairs. Thank you.
Thank you all. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
The chair will now recognize Dr. Marshall for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Welcome, everybody. I want to talk about biofuels, conservation, and innovation for a second. So I'm a biochemistry major, obviously went on to medical school, and certainly have seen this incredible things happen since my first memorizing that atomic chart back in 10th grade as well. Maybe talk about biofuels. Anybody experienced with any of the biofuels, what is happening at the basic science level, what's happening at the innovation level? Mr. Toomey, you want to share anything, what you got cooking?
Well, we've always been excited to find new as you call it, feedstocks. So we've got fossil fuels. There are other things that you can use to start the chemical process. Biofuels, components are a great source of that. In fact, in the recently passed Farm Bill, there was some very important language about defining how do you account for the bio elements within your feedstocks, and that's been transformational in allowing us to show bio-based plastics. So I think that the feedstock, using it not only as a fuel for mobility, but actually as the source for plastics is an incredibly exciting future.
I was down in Florida, and they were taking sugar cane and turning it into plates and biodegradable cups and stuff like that. A great future for it. Dr. Warner, did you have something you wanted to share?
Yeah, it's an interesting issue when we look at the bioeconomy and trying to make traditional materials from biosources. The 270 years of modern chemistry we've been doing in chemistry, trying to make things easy to purify at the end, easy to extract, to scale up. Bioprocesses essentially make that really hard, that bio milieu, if you will. We haven't really invented enough technologies to efficiently and cost effectively pull them out. And that's one of the big research barriers right now, is the cost-effective way to scale up the final purification of those materials. So from a technical gap, that's where the technical gap actually lies.
Yeah, Dr. Zimmerman. I read body language pretty good.
I do a lot of research in my own laboratory on this question. I think the other big issue with bio-based feedstocks is, the petroleum industry is really good at getting a barrel of crude oil out of the ground and using every single fraction of that. We are not as good when we take a bio feedstock of saying this much goes to fuel and the rest isn't waste. What do we do with it? And I think the other big chemical challenge is being able to harness value out of every fraction of that biomass, just like a petroleum refinery would. We call it the integrated biorefinery. And that changes the economics of the system, where sometimes those really low volume but high value fractions actually drive the economics, and your fuel becomes a waste product out of going after these other compounds. The other thing bio-based and biofuels offer is new chemistry, things that we can't do from petroleum feedstocks. We have new starting materials, and we can make new things, new performance that we're not able to get out of the petroleum economy. So I think it's not just replacing what's there, but actually creating and innovating a new opportunity.
Right. I think another great example I can think of is when ethanol first kind of hit the market 20 or 30 years ago. The cattle feeders were, oh my gosh, this is going to drive the cost of corn up. Well, the next thing you know, a byproduct, dry distillers grain, has a huge high protein content. And what was once a waste product, we now export it across the world, and we feed it to our cattle, and again more. And every month it seems like there's something new and improved coming out in that industry. Now they're using sorghum, which uses less water to grow, in place of corn, and able to use those interchangeably. And now we haven't started about the biodiesels. So let's maybe talk about conservation and innovation. That since 2003, the carbon gas output of this country has a nice steady trend downward. And just want to be curious what you all see the future looks like, what conservation projects you think might be working. You probably maybe more the lines of innovation as I look at this crowd in your industry. What do you see for the future of innovation? I happen to believe that innovation can do more to drive the carbon footprint down than any law that I can write up here. So prove me right.
I would say from the chemical industry standpoint, there's a tremendous incentive to always look for new efficiencies and new processes and technologies that can help drive down emissions, whether it be of carbon or other potential air pollutants. We, as an industry, have made significant progress since we started measuring carbon emissions in 1990 through the Responsible Care Program, which I mentioned earlier, and are committed to continuing that progress in the future.
Anybody else on innovation? Dr. Persons, go ahead.
Sir. Yes, sir. Thank you. I just wanted to mention one example. When we looked at our technologies across catalysts, solvents, and continuous processing in our 2018 report, one of the things that came out in the catalysts, this relates to Mr. Tonko's question earlier, was a 2016 company called New Light Technologies won a presidential green chemistry challenge for developing and commercializing biocatalysts that is capturing methane and combining it with air to create a material that matched or exceeded the performance of petroleum-based. So there was a way to reduce a very intensive greenhouse gas, put it into everyday products like packaging and cell phone cases, furniture and things. And I think based upon what we heard our stakeholders say, and I think you're hearing here, that we're sort of scratching the surface on some of these things that can be a win-win in that regard.
Thanks. Chairwoman, my last questioner. You got anybody else? Okay, I yield back. Thank you.
We're going to start a second round of questioning, in part because I didn't even get all my questions in the first 5 minutes, and this is such a fascinating topic. As we go back to the original charter here and the 12 principles, one of which is on the safety standards as well as the role that our agencies provide in codifying those standards. I think about the Environmental Protection Agency and we were talking about the hazardous claim and what chemicals fall into that and how it's governed. And I was just wondering if maybe a handful of you could shed some light in terms of the regulation from the EPA and if it's seen as cumbersome or welcome, if it's a guiding force, and maybe if there are some improvements that we can make to that EPA regulatory process, we'd love to hear it.
So thank you, Madam Chairwoman. In our tech assessment, we did do compile a compendium, and there were several EPA programs, some of which were prize-oriented and others were basic research and doing toxicology. As you know, we've done other work on TSCA, as Mr. Tonko mentioned, and the IRIS program, just to collect toxic substance data in a database, which we recently had on our high-risk list because of the challenges there. So there's more research and development for EPA to do in its own way in terms of managing or understanding environmental risks, not only in the toxic spaces, but as you open the aperture, so to speak, into more green chemistry, as Drs. Warner and Zimmerman have been discussing. And then again, if you open it even more in terms of sustainability, to be able to build those metrics and do that research and compile the data, if you will, over a long period of time.
Thank you. One program we'd highlight is the EPA Safer Choice Program, which is a voluntary program to get EPA imprimatur on products that have improved hazard characteristics. And I think that that can go even further by doing a little bit more scientific life cycle analysis and calling for that. But we really find that to be a great program underway.
So I want to make one point, it's really important, is that green chemistry has never been about regulation, and there's actually not a regulatory framework that goes along with the idea of green chemistry. I think the reason there is such broad consensus on this topic is because it's about innovation, it's about aligning environmental and economic goals, and I think we should be mindful of bringing regulation.
So we can do innovation as we regulate. That's great. Keep going if you want to. I love what you're saying.
So I think we need to lead with an innovation agenda if we're going to talk about these topics of green and sustainable chemistry. I think the other interesting thing to point about is this regulation around collecting this tox data, the toxicity data, is especially around green chemistry, is being able to use that information to drive design and innovation of new chemicals and new molecules. So we're not just regulating for the sake of, should this be good or bad, but how do we use that knowledge to actually design a future that's better than the one we have today?
That's a really important part. So right now, you'd be amazed that your average PhD graduating from a university in chemistry is probably completely unaware of the regulatory frameworks. Mm-hmm. It does not drive innovation. There is a disconnect for what, so you don't have a class at universities on chemical regulations. You graduate, you get a job, and then you find out when you're on the job about the real world. If we could have this be part of the intellectual process of becoming a chemist, it has the potential to change everything. And that's what we really need to do, is we need to create a conduit. Every time we learn about some mechanism that causes some harm, if that does not make it to an inventor's laboratory, then what's the point? We need to invent the better things, and we need to see that the most critical element is to take the knowledge of the bad and make it a design principle of a future technology. And right now, those connections are not made.
Certainly, I just would like to mention that the 2016 update to TSCA that's being implemented right now was really designed with innovation in mind, and certainly trying not to be a hindrance to innovation. We were very supportive of that legislation. We worked closely with NGOs and with members of Congress from both sides of the aisle. It was signed into law by President Obama, and going through the process of prioritizing chemistries for review, which is underway right now, and looking again at utilizing modern approaches to chemical assessment and chemical regulation and protection of confidential business information at the same time really is designed to help encourage innovation without stifling it.
Wonderful. I'm out of time. More questions. Did you? Okay, I'm gonna yield back my time and recognize, did you want to do 5? Okay, and I'm gonna recognize Dr. Baird for 5 minutes of questioning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate that, okay? You know, I'm sure that all of you, I'm amazed at the talents and skills that you have. And I'm sure that as you thought about this meeting and being a witness, that you had things you thought we ought to know. So I'm going to give each one of you that opportunity to tell us the 1 or 2 things that you think on this committee, because we have oversight on a lot of the science and research and basic research, and that's not an easy task. So I'd just like to give each one of you, if you want to, a couple of things that you think you'd like for this committee to know.
Thank you, Mr. Baird. I'll start, and I just want to touch on something you said in your opening remarks. It really, this does constitute an opportunity, as you're hearing, I think, from the panelists here, it's a tremendous opportunity for the United States in innovation and competitiveness. I think the last discussion about it's not regulations versus innovation, it's how innovation can symbiotically interact with things, and it does require a key element of leadership, not the federal government in and of itself, but the convening power of the federal government to try and do this. And I think it goes significantly to the future of U.S. competitiveness, the manufacturing sector in general, the way we do research, again, thinking things in this life cycle context, where that's been largely absent in us, is, I think, the key opportunity. And I think if any country in the world can do this, it's the United States with the collective resources that we have. Thank you.
Thank you. I have two points. The first one is about education. I think that if a young child dreams to be a musician, they understand that they're going to have to practice, and it takes a pathway to become a musician. If a child wants to be an athlete, they know that the first time they throw a ball, it's not going to work well, and they got to practice. But is there a model of what it means to be an inventor? Is there a model of what it means to be an innovator? Does a young child see that path? And what opportunities are we losing because we're not illustrating that path? And if the crisis of sustainability lies in the domain of invention, we need more inventors. And we need to really be introspective. Does our educational system in K through 12 and in university actually foster the concept of innovation and invention? And that's just something we really need to take a deeper look at. And the second point is just to reiterate, the field of toxicology, the field of environmental health sciences is burgeoning with information. Every day there's new results happening. There is no conduit to the inventor's lab table. We need to find policy ways or whatever ways to help facilitate that invention. If smart people that want to invent things have the tools to invent, they will invent.
I have 2 points also. I think one is this is a great space for public-private partnerships. There's a lot of opportunity here where there are a lot of innovations and discoveries that are in academic labs, in national labs, or in startups that don't have the capital or the expertise to go through that pipeline and get those at scale in the market and commercialized. There's some really good examples of this in other countries, including Green Center Canada, where they've set up a similar idea of bringing technologies in. It's a self-supporting entity on the royalties and licensing agreements of those technologies that come out the other end. Go back into support for the research and development. And speaking of the national labs, that's a great place for us to go look. So that's research that is being mandated and can be directed. And there are a lot of innovations and patents that are sitting on the shelf at the national labs that should be in a database that's searchable, that other people in academia and small businesses can build on to advance green chemistry.
I would just reiterate the importance of that collaboration between the public and private sectors. I think through that collaboration, we can make significant strides in new innovations, but also in idea incubation, commercialization and otherwise. And legislation like that, which we are talking about today, there's another piece of legislation called the Clean Industrial Technologies Act that's being introduced today as well, that's looking more at processes and how to make more sustainable processes available and refine them for the industrial sector. These kinds of initiatives by the government, I think, are the kind of opportunities where you allow the private sector to do what you do best, what they do best, and you allow the government and the public sector to do what they do best.
Very briefly, I think it's just important to reiterate how much demand we're seeing in the marketplace for these solutions. The market is correcting towards a sustainable economy, and I think that we are actively pursuing that. And if we can do anything as companies, perhaps it would be to bring you the evidence, and especially we as a business-to-business company across so many different sectors, we're seeing this articulated in every industry. And so I think that there is a maturing process going on within the marketplace that needs some knowledge sharing and some access to new patents and ideas, but it is active and happening, and we'd be delighted to be able to help increase the kind of knowledge base of this committee.
Thank you.
So the United States often feels like it's in this big global competition because we are. And the squirm is China's out-investing us. They're out-investing us in R&D. They're, outpacing us on applications for artificial intelligence. And we look at the spends, we look at our budget, we play a role as the science committee in the R&D investment conversation, although we're not appropriators, as our chair likes to say, we're authorizers. And we're all, by and large, fans of the investment in basic research to spur the innovations and to help set the table. So the takeaway from the conversation around public-private partnerships and where industry and academia tie into the table setting that the federal government offers is an imperative, and it's obviously essential to our success, and it's the American best practice that we afford here. I'm going to give Mr. Toomey a warning because I think I've got some questions for the record coming to you, but we're delighted to have had BASF here today, and in particular coming from southeastern Michigan, where you employ nearly 100 people in my district from Wixom to Livonia, Michigan, and as the home of our nation's automotive capital, I'll just say your role in terms of helping us meet our sustainable chemistry goals and your dedication to best practices and your leadership as a corporate steward have really meant a lot to us. And so we look forward to following up with you on some additional technical questions. And that's in part why we were gnawing at this notion of regulation, because there are nuances and there are complexities and a toughness to it, but it doesn't impede what we're ultimately doing with sustainable chemistry, which is propelling the innovations of the future. We recently had a hearing here on the Research and Tech Subcommittee on recycling technologies and started to dig at plastics. And certainly we're dismayed to find out that we really haven't been studying some of the toxicological effects to plastics, but also recognizing that there's great opportunity here with reuse, that we don't have to make the hysteria of the plastics paradox the failure of what we can do to achieve sustainability goals. So, Ms. Kolton, we'd really like to recognize you and the work that you're doing with the Alliance, and would like to continue to invite you to chime in and be a part of the discussions and the solutions that we'd like to catalyze here in the United States around recycling technologies for plastics and single use. Everything that you all touch and do is responsible for the might of our, not only our economic success, but our health success, and frankly, the outcomes for national security as well. So we thank you for that. And we'll also recognize Dr. Zimmerman for her dedication to definitions. As somebody who was doing the taxonomy around the future of work in the digital age of manufacturing, codifying the job roles specific to the changing nature of advanced manufacturing, utilizing a taxonomy, we know how important definitions are and how important they are to our scientists. So I'm sure Dr. Warner and your center and just your great success utilizes some of that. And we'll take your recommendation, by the way, to continue to encourage academia to instruct around the regulations. It's always such a surprising thing. You graduate college, you spend 4 years steeped in a degree program, maybe you go on and then you emerge and you realize, oh, there's a whole bunch of other things I didn't learn. And so the charge, too, to how we continue to spur and create a nation of innovators, our plight in the post-9/11 era, frankly, what emerged this country out of 9/11, which was this incredible ability to innovate and proliferate the internet and propagate the iPhone, by the way, using those rare earth minerals that we want to continue to have access to. So as this country finds itself in the middle of a trade war, we might say that we want to go into trade wars strategically with our allies and the alliances that help us be successful. We're just so grateful for your leadership, and thank you, Dr. Persons, for your incredible portfolio of work. We know it's not easy to work at the GAO. We in Congress love the GAO because we're going to cite your studies and we get your charge now. When you're on the agency side, like Ms. Kolton and I were, a GAO study's coming up. How do we make sure we really get our points in there? But keep going with everything you're up to. We're certainly thanking all of you. The record's going to be open for an additional 2 weeks here, and statements from members or additional questions, as I already alluded to, are coming for Mr. Toomey that we may ask of the witnesses. But at this time, our witnesses are excused. Thank you for just a wonderful hearing, and we are now adjourned.